thinking people. So audience demo is always an interesting question to get into, because there's always going to be kind of this rift between who they think they're going after and who they want to, and the people that are actually showing up. To piggyback off of that, there's another question, what sort of learnings have you had coming into this project? A lot of times what you can figure out here is that there's things that they may have learned from something they've done before that they haven't explained to you coming into it. Good example of this that happened just today was process in redesigning some booth things for a client. And I had asked some more questions about how was the design of your old booth? How did this work? Were people interacting with it in the way that you wanted to? And they were able to explain some things to me about how people were coming into a previous booth that I otherwise would have never heard from anybody else. And if I hadn't had that, it would have drastically affected how I was designing these elements in the new one, just based on how someone is kind of coming in and flowing through these different touch points in a specific environment that they're seeing. So a lot of times it can be really good to just ask, like, hey, you have, especially with internal teams, if you're working as someone that's more of an outsider, a freelancer, a lot of times the internal teams that you're working with in a business will have infinitely more learnings from things that they've iterated on and done in the past than what you would ever be able to get coming in from the outside at the last minute. So a lot of that stuff is things that you can take with you and say, hey, I know that you mentioned that people weren't working with the booth in this way, so I changed this thing to function slightly differently to help alleviate that pain moving forward. Another one that we have here is differentiators. This can kind of go back to that whiskey distillery example that I gave. Their brand obviously was one where they were saying that they wanted to be different, more new, more kind of coming into this industry in a way that other people hadn't seen before. So a lot of times what you can ask is like, hey, how is your brand different from the people around you? Because a lot of times in working through a lot of creative pursuits, some of that stuff can get lost because you're trying to create assets and external facing things that really get people to feel things. And I think in that process, kind of like what Ray was mentioning when we first got into the talk, is like melding the creative with the analytical. And if you go too far one way or the other, you lose this really intense middle ground of being able to like make people feel passionate about what they're doing, but also explain the value at the same time. And a lot of times what can happen with the differentiators within a business is just that. They'll either go super sales heavy and it just feels like this, you're selling me garbage and I don't want anything to do with it type of thing. Or it'll go the other way where it's like, you just created some crazy far out like perfume commercial where at the end of it, you're just like, I don't know what you just showed me. I'm supposed to feel something, but I don't even know what that even was. So you're always kind of